United States Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has called for international pressure to force a deal between the government in Kabul and the Taliban to end the conflict in war-torn Afghanistan. Lloyd Austin tweeted, I'm quoting now, "The security situation in Afghanistan only argues more for international pressure to have a negotiated political settlement to end this conflict and give the Afghan people the government they want and they deserve. The entire world can help by continuing this push." Austin made the call a day after US President Joe Biden announced that American withdrawal from Afghanistan after nearly 2 decades of war would be completed by the 31st of August. And this has given rise to fears that the country would plunge into another civil war once the foreign troops leave. The Pentagon chief did not specify which countries he was urging to help secure a settlement after a year of fruitless talks in Doha between the two sides. Pakistan is widely believed to have significant influence over the Taliban. Islamabad has also been accused of providing a safe haven to Taliban terrorists. Meanwhile, Iran recently facilitated a meeting between an Afghan government delegation and Taliban representatives in Tehran. The US has urged all regional countries to help speed up the peace process.
Our hope is that other nations in the region, whatever they do, whatever their bilateral relations are with Afghanistan, it is to support that end. A negotiated peaceful solution so that it doesn't render into civil war, and that there's an Afghanistan that is peaceful, prosperous, and secure going forward, that the Afghan people own.
Austin's call comes as the Taliban terrorists who were ousted from power in 2001 by the US-led invasion have steadily gained ground against the government forces. On Friday, the Taliban claimed that they had control of 85% of the country. The Pentagon, though, still believes that the Afghan government forces can prevail over the Taliban.
Over the last 20 years, through great blood and treasure, we and our allies, it hasn't just been the United States, have helped build a capacity inside the Afghan National Security and Defense Forces, which is impressive. They have an air force, a competent air force. The Taliban has none. They do have more forces in the field than what we estimate the Taliban to have. And they have modern weaponry, and they have had the training to use that weaponry.
The Taliban claim to control 85% of Afghanistan despite 20 years of American intervention in the country. With NATO troops also pulling out, it remains unclear who Lloyd Austin is appealing to. Neither a 2-decade-long US military intervention nor diplomatic talks with the Taliban have delivered a peaceful solution. The question remains, is the US abandoning Afghans who supported the war on terror? Afghanistan's biggest neighbors are Pakistan and Iran. Neither is an American ally. US influence in Kabul is expected to decrease further. Joining us for more on these developments is investigative journalist Michael Kay, joining us from Athens. Thanks very much for speaking with us. You have spent nearly a year working in Kabul, Kandahar and Helmand as a strategic military planner in 2003, 2004. You've also reported on Afghanistan intensively. Give us a better sense of what you're making of the current situation, specifically of this appeal that's been made by Lloyd Austin.
Hi, Molly. The sound bites that are coming out of the Defense Secretary at the moment from someone like myself who's got extensive experience inside the country from a military perspective, but also looking across the political, the economic, the security and the narcotic lines of development, it just makes no sense whatsoever. You've got to come at negotiations with an organization like the Taliban from a position of power. And that is not where the US and the coalition and the Afghan government are at right now. And they haven't been for a long time. I think that's the first key point. The second key point is just picking up on one of the sound bites from the Defense Secretary about Afghanistan having an air force now. It does have an air force, but it's in its infancy. I've got colleagues who have been training up Afghan helicopter pilots in counterterrorism and counter-narcotics over the last 20 years under an operation called the Special Mission Wing. And these are very niche capabilities. But if you look at what the US has in terms of its air power, and you look at the way that air power has been deployed against the Taliban over the last 20 years, look where we're at. The US, that has the most sophisticated and powerful air force in the world, has still not been able to bring the Taliban through massive boots on the ground with a massive air power capability. It's not been able to bring the Taliban to its knees. So the Defense Secretary talking about an Afghan air force just seems completely absurd. And then there's sort of the last soundbite. I mean, we could talk about this all day, Molly, but the last soundbite on this is what's changed? All exit strategies. I was intensively involved in the campaign warfighting plan for the Brits who were coming into Helmand Province, which is one of the most fiercely contested provinces in Afghanistan, due to the river, due to the fertile soil, and obviously that's what makes opium that's been bankrolling the Taliban. I was part of the military strategic campaign planning team for that. And there has to be an exit strategy. And the exit strategy should be what's called conditions-based, i.e. there are certain conditions that are met across the political, the economic, the security, and the narcotics lines of development in order to facilitate a withdrawal. I mean, if I was in front of the Defense Secretary, I'd ask him, what has changed that is now giving you the confidence that you can withdraw and a political settlement will be reached? And I just don't know what the answer would be, because nothing has changed, certainly in a favorable way.
Do you agree with the view that America is leaving behind a mess that the Afghan government will not be able to deal with? The Taliban, as of now, claims to control 85% of the country. Is a complete Taliban takeover inevitable, according to you?
I think we need to be careful about accepting the Taliban claims of 85% control. I certainly don't think that is the case. I do think that provincial capitals will be the target of the Taliban in the coming weeks and the coming months. There's talk about the airport in Kabul also being threatened. The airport is obviously a very strategic location for Western powers in terms of their influence of getting logistics in and out. But the point is that even if the airport is secured, the Taliban are they're going to run riot on the lines of communication from the airport to strategic points like embassies and things. So, I mean, there's certainly that to have to contend with. What the US, what the coalition have done in Afghanistan over the last 20 years was it went from a mission that seeked to neutralize the Al-Qaeda camps in the weeks and months after the 9/11 attacks into a nation-building mission. And I think what is forgotten when we're talking about this is the original mission of the military, certainly when I was there in 2003 and 2004, was a supporting mission. It was to support the State Department's mission, which was the extension of centralized governance from Kabul out to the provinces, the districts, and the shuras. That was the key mission, and the military there were there to support that. How? By providing security that would enable democratic elections to take place. Now, this is a very, very interesting point, because when we're talking about power sharing with the Taliban, I mean, it's not exactly the same. In fact, it's quite different, but you can get an idea when it comes to the IRA and Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland. If the Taliban do accept some form of power sharing agreement, the terms and conditions of that, I think, are still unknown, and I don't think would be acceptable from the Taliban side in terms of the Afghan government and the West allowing things to move forward. But let's say they came to a compromise. The way democracy works is that there should be free and fair elections inside the provinces, inside Afghanistan. If the Taliban are on the ticket and they are on the ballot and people can vote for them, if people decide not to vote for them in a local election inside one of the provinces, are the Taliban going to accept a defeat at the political level? That's a question that I've not heard asked. That's a question that I've certainly not heard answered. And it's certainly a question I'm not sure has been thought out. So if there is some sort of political agreement, how does the democratic process actually play out in real time? Because A, I wouldn't trust the Taliban as far as I could throw them, and B, I certainly wouldn't trust them to accept any form of defeat when they're on the ballot in the provinces outwith of Kabul.
Mikey K, thanks very much for sharing those perspectives. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.